Brass Tacks, I'm Zaka Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions. The war over oil tariffs on India imposed by the Trump administration has now taken another ugly turn. Trump's senior trade advisor, Peter Navarro, has called India the Maharaja of tariffs, almost like a laundromat, he says, for Russian oil, and thereby enabling Putin's war machine. The irony is this, and the External Affairs Minister, while speaking in Moscow, alluded to this. He said it was the United States which encouraged India to buy Russian oil in the first place. When the war started back in 2022, this was a way to try and stabilize global oil prices, and particularly inflation, which at that point of time in Europe, even in the United States, was really skyrocketing. So the US encouraged India to buy Russian oil at that time. And now, 3 years later, India is getting punished for that very same act of buying Russian oil. So the logic is a bit perplexing. That's the phrase that the foreign minister used in Moscow yesterday. What can India do before these secondary sanctions kick in? Because these sanctions now kick in the middle of next week, on the 27th of August. If the logic of imposing those sanctions was to try and get Putin to come to Alaska, that objective has been achieved. But Navarro has now added a new caveat to it, saying the road to peace in Ukraine passes through New Delhi. In a sense, what the Trump administration is doing is hinging India onto whether or not there will be peace in Ukraine. Basically saying that Putin's behavior and whether or not he agrees to a peace deal in Ukraine, India will have to pay the price for it.
In the world of global diplomacy, India's energy choices have become a hot-button issue. As the West intensifies its scrutiny, India continues to make strategic decisions that defy global expectations. At the heart of this debate, Russian oil. While the US and other Western nations see this as a problem, India views it as a necessity for its growing economy and energy security. The stakes are high, and India is standing firm on its choices. US President Donald Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarro has called India the Maharaja of tariffs and a laundromat for the Kremlin. According to him, India is profiteering from the war in Ukraine by purchasing discounted Russian oil.
Prior to the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, India bought virtually no Russian oil. I mean, it was like 1% of their needs. So the argument somehow now, as the percentage has gone up to like 30 and 35%, that somehow they need Russian oil.
But India's response is clear. It's not just about oil, it's about energy security. India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has repeatedly emphasized that India is committed to its energy security. It's not about politics. It's about feeding a nation of over 1.4 billion people. India needs oil, and Russia is offering a discount that benefits India's economy.
We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian oil. That is China. We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian LNG. I'm not sure, but I think that is the European Union. The Americans said for the last few years that we should do everything to stabilize the world energy markets, including buying oil from Russia. Incidentally, we also buy oil from America, and that amount has been increasing.
India's relationship with Russian oil isn't just about a short-term fix. It's part of a larger vision: energy sovereignty. India has grown its oil imports from Russia from just 1.7% in 2020 to a staggering 35% in 2025. This isn't a coincidence, it's intentional. India's priority is clear: secure affordable energy and reduce reliance on unpredictable suppliers. As Western sanctions tighten around Russia, India has found an opportunity to secure discounted oil, helping to keep its economy stable and fueling rapid industrialization. For Russia, this partnership has been a lifeline. Moscow has struggled with Western sanctions, but India's increasing reliance on Russian oil has allowed Russia to redirect its energy exports to a reliable partner. This isn't about taking sides. It's about meeting energy needs in a volatile world.
Есть у нас хорошие результаты в сотрудничестве в сфере углеводородов, поставки российской нефти на индийский рынок.
For India, this deal isn't a political statement. It's a pragmatic decision in a world where energy is the foundation of everything, from electricity generation to transportation and even industrial growth. Oil remains a critical component of India's energy mix. But India isn't alone in this approach. China, India's neighbor and rival, is also buying Russian oil at record levels. Together, India and China now make up over 60% of Russia's oil exports, a vital lifeline for Moscow. However, there's an irony here. The US, while chastising India for its energy ties with Russia, has refrained from similar criticism of China. This double standard is not lost on India, and it underscores the complexities of global diplomacy.
The United States has imposed tariffs of up to 50% on India and even threatened for more. China firmly opposes it. In the face of such acts, silence or compromise only emboldens the bully. China will firmly stand with India.
The West has been relentless in its pressure on India to reduce its oil imports from Russia. But take a closer look at the numbers. In data shared by Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, China bought the highest percentage of Russia's crude oil. Its purchase stands at 47%. Same is the case with coal, as China again bought a majority, 44% of all Russia's coal exports as of June this year. Interestingly, Turkey, which happens to be a key NATO member, is the largest buyer of Russian oil product exports with 26% purchase. Talk about West's double standards, and EU's LNG purchase of Russia's LNG stands at a whopping 51%, as it's also the case with pipeline gas, where EU is again the highest buyer at 37%. India's commitment to energy security is unwavering, and the world must understand India's decisions are made for its people, not based on the whims of global power struggles. So, as India continues to balance energy deals with Russia, diplomatic ties with the West, and a rising China, one thing is for sure: India is no longer just a player in the energy game. It's setting the rules for its future and navigating the geopolitics with sharp diplomacy and bold decisions.
All right, so it's almost looking like a certainty now that the oil tariffs on India for importing Russian oil will kick in from the 27th of August. That's mid next week. Is there anything India can do to try and avert that? Because it seems more a political move by the Trump administration as opposed to having any kind of economic rationale. Richard Quest, CNN business anchor, is now joining us. Thank you very much, Richard, for speaking with us. So the Trump administration, I think Trump himself, after the Alaska meeting with President Putin, sort of spoke to reporters, and he gave an interview where he said that one of the reasons for imposing this 25% additional oil tariffs on India for importing Russian oil was to get Putin to the negotiating table, was to get President Putin to Alaska. Now that that's happened, basically, I think the phrase that he used was, if you squeeze their second largest customer, they will feel the pain too. So now that that's happened, do you think that Washington could reconsider this additional 25% levy on Indian import of Russian oil?
Only it was that simple, but it's not, because if that was the goal of if that was the original goal of putting on the secondary sanctions, yes, it brought Putin to the table, but it hasn't clearly provided the necessary squeeze or push for Putin to agree to anything. So, but also considering the mercurial position of the president, the US president, that you're never really sure what he's going to do next. If Putin continues to defy him, either by not meeting Zelensky or not agreeing to a ceasefire, or basically continuing to prosecute the war in the way that he has, then the leverage that Donald Trump has to use against him increases in importance. And that, of course, absolutely is the secondary sanctions on India. So I think it would be way too soon to say that they are off the table and that India could relax. I think it's probably the opposite. I think it's the pressure. It may be the only pressure left that the US president can bring immediately.
But the feeling here in India is getting punished for, a war which it has nothing to do with. It's being fought, God knows, 4,000 to 5,000 miles away from here. And the Foreign Affairs Minister of India yesterday, while he was in Moscow, he said this, that when the war started in 2022, it was the United States which encouraged India to buy more Russian oil to try and stabilize global oil prices. And now India is getting punished for the same thing. So he said, and this is his words, the logic is a bit perplexing. What do you make of that?
He's right. I mean, there's no getting away from it. When the EU chose to use the cap method on the price of oil to put the necessary pressure on Russia, India was one of those that assisted by buying the oil, thereby allowing the cap mechanism to work. And now, of course, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you take part in it, then you get screwed. And if you don't take part in it, you get screwed. So there's a certain truth in that unfairness of the position. But here's where I think the minister is being somewhat rose-colored spectacles on it. Everybody now knows that the oil sales are an important part of Russia's revenue. And whatever the situation may have been 2 years ago is not the same situation now. Many more tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have died and been maimed. And India is continuing to buy. And I guess really, at the end of the day, it's the same argument that was advanced right at the beginning. Whose side are you on? Well, I guess India and certainly other nations would say we want to be friends to all, enemies with none. Good luck with that. You sometimes have to choose. And if you don't choose, then others may well do it for you, and that's what's happening now.
So, Richard, again, the feeling here in Delhi and in the government here in Delhi seems to be, look, if there was an economic rationale, if you're punishing Delhi for buying Russian oil at cheap prices and then processing it and exporting it wherever, then you should be punishing everyone who does that. China is the largest importer of Russian oil. It's not India. And China doesn't get these secondary sanctions on oil. The European Union is the largest importer of Russian gas. Again, there is no secondary sanctions on Europe for it. So it seems like, and the feeling here is, India is being singled out.
I can stop you there. With 2 words. Grow up. The people who advance that argument are doing so from a very simplistic position. The idea that, well, you should be doing it for absolute rubbish. The Europeans have done huge measures in an effort to put the maximum pressure, including the sale of arms, the provision of arms, the provision of all sorts of other aspects to Ukraine. The purchases of gas are being done for very specific reasons in extremely difficult and unique circumstances. You take each person as you find them. You're not going to put pressure on China because there are other issues involved there. No, the idea that everybody should be treated equally is a nonsense. You put the pressure where you can. In the case of India, you can put the pressure. India has made a great deal of money, has benefited hugely. It has not done, as far as we can tell, anything to assist if you will, the coalition of the willing in this sense. Quite the opposite. It's made it clear it doesn't want to get involved in that. Well, if you don't want to get involved, somebody will get you involved. And this idea of equality for all is just nonsense. It's naive and it's a nonsense.
But one could make the case that this is Europe's war. I mean, it's happening on continental Europe. It's not India's war. It's far, far away from India.
And so, what's your point?
So the point is, why then is India alone getting punished for it? In the case of China, again, I think it was Rubio.
Oh, come on, that is simplistic. That is simplistic and bordering naive. The argument is this: India wants to play both sides of the game here. India wants to buy the Russian cheap oil and sell it onto international markets. It wants to have the benefit, but it also wants to play in US markets. It wants to do business with the European Union. It wants to enjoy all the benefits it can of the largest, most profitable, richest markets in the world. Well, guess what? In real life, you sometimes have to choose who your friends are. You have to make difficult choices. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just giving you the argument that politicians and diplomats in the West will tell you. You want to play in our markets, India. You want to do this. You want to do that. Well, don't screw us over when we're trying to do the other. This is a war that's being brought, that was started by Russia, where the West is saying every possible point of pressure has to be borne to bear upon it. And that's why. Look, India didn't say, when President Trump involved himself in the recent skirmish between India and Pakistan, India didn't say, no, Mr. Trump, this is thousands of miles away from you. We don't want you. We don't want you. No, they didn't. Of course, they wanted the president, right? Because as long as you've got the president, you've got his attention and you're making him feel wanted and needed, and the United States will reward you in other ways. So you can't have it both ways. You can't play in the market when you want to and not when you don't.
So why is this not then being applied on China?
Oh, be realistic. You know the reasons for that. The trade relationship with China is far more crucial and strategically important, and therefore, you will use different mechanisms and weapons against China, metaphorical weapons against China, because it's not a one size fits all. In this environment, you use the pressure that's most effective at any given point. And for the moment, the US president has decided that putting that sort of pressure on China is not warranted. But if you put that pressure on India, you stand to get, pardon the phrase, a good bang for the buck. And therefore you can advance the position that you want. Now, look, it's by no means clear the president will go forward with his secondary sanctions on India for all the difficult reasons that we understand and that we know. But this notion that just because you've done one, you don't do the other, I think it doesn't take account of the reality. And the reality is that Russia and China are much closer. They have the cooperation pact. You had the closest as possible agreement. You've had the visits by Putin and Xi. That same level does not exist between India and Russia, where India is mercantilistically taking advantage of the situation, and the West is not unreasonably saying, all right, whose side are you on? If you want to be neutral, then you're going to have to take the consequences of that. And that might be this.
So if the original point was to try and get Putin to Alaska, and that's happened, but he's not really anywhere close to ending this war, so then the whole idea of using India as leverage, that the rationale of it goes away because he's not ending the war anyway. He's not being cooperative.
No. Well, we don't know. We don't know. We do know that India has reduced dramatically its purchases of Russian oil. We know that because China is picking up the slack. All right? So we do know that. Is it possible that China, that the strategy of tariffing India or additional tariffs on India because of this doesn't work? Totally. Absolutely. If China picks up the slack of the oil that India was purchasing, then you're right. It's been a zero-sum game, and you're back to square one. In that case, you're right. Then the US has the difficult choice: are you going to do secondary sanctions on China? If you want that oil to be part of your arsenal of weapons, then yes, you are going to be forced to saying, we tried it with India, it didn't work. Now we need to try it with China, because China frustrated our attempts with India by picking up the slack of the purchases. If China wasn't buying more, then this strategy might be working. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I can well see a scenario where the US president does have to make that separate and difficult choice to secondary sanction China.
If you were to leave the secondary sanctions issue aside, do you believe that a trade deal between India and the United States is still possible?
Oh, of course it is. Absolutely. You're dealing with a transactional president. I think what I would say is that, don't for a second, look, in fact, funny enough, I just happen to have the papers, pure luck, next to my desk here. So you've got countries and territories reciprocal tariff adjusted. And here's all the list. And there's India with its 25%. Now, India's best hope is to get it down to the 15% of others. It's not probably going to get it down to 10%. It might be lucky and get it down. So you're looking at the EU sort of levels at best. And then you're going to be looking at the framework agreement, which, funny enough, again, I just happen to have in my desk. Yeah, you're going to be looking at the framework agreement that they did with the EU and the US and be asking, what is it we can give? If you look at the EU framework agreement, it was this line about the EU agreeing to remove all industrial tariffs and open market access, or increase open market access for agricultural products, dairy, bison, seafood, lobster, and all of that sort of thing. Now, we've already had the Indian Prime Minister saying, look, basically, I know what needs to be done. I'm going to take pain for it because I'm not going to do it because I've got my own domestic constituency. Well, that's his choice. Don't expect to get a zero tariff. If you're lucky, you'll get a 15% tariff. But India needs to ask, what are we going to give Mr. Trump in return for that? It's a transaction. It's a deal.
All right, Richard Quest, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, CNN business anchor Richard Quest there, with his unique take on what's been going on with Trump and the oil tariffs and India sort of getting caught in the crossfire. He reckons that those tariffs will kick in most likely next week, the 27th, the middle of next week, unless something dramatic really happens. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we have to. So the whole world is finding its own ways to deal with the Trump tariffs. We've seen countries like China, for example, that have openly taken on Trump, and eventually Trump has given in. And then there is, of course, the European model where you're basically just kowtowing to him in the hope that he will be benign with you. Let me now go across to Chetan Bhagat, author and someone who's written about this recently in the Times of India, and a fascinating article, I thought, Chetan. So you argue in your piece, and I'm just going to read some of the excerpts from it. Assertiveness needs to be balanced with accommodation. A certain level of assertiveness is essential. India has grown more assertive over the last 2 or 3 decades, but our assertiveness needs to be dialed down for now. Can you sort of explain that to our viewers?
Yes. So, we've all been hearing stories about ye Naya Bharat hai. This is a new India. It holds its own. And that has been a sentiment. It's not just my sentiment. It's almost part of popular culture in our movies that's been said. And that is a form of assertiveness. India has been asserting itself on the world stage. And you do it by many ways. You do it by putting your own interests first. You do by not signing certain, say, climate deals if it's not working for you. You hit back. You kind of counter arguments in trade, stuff like that. And India has been doing that. And for the most part, it has been necessary because India wasn't assertive enough. However, like anything, like even in life, if say somebody's not treating you right at work, if you're not assertive, they're going to walk all over you. But at some point, the assertiveness becomes too much. And I think India needs to dial that down a bit and make it more accommodating, because what has been countered in response to our assertiveness probably is these massive 50% tariffs, which is one of a kind. Like no country in the world has it. 25% is the Russian penalty tariffs, that why are you friends with Russia? 25% is the other tariff, which is also high compared to many other countries. So that has a very big effect on India, and some people have even called tariffs as an act of war. I mean, Warren Buffett, I think, said that it's like an act of war because it is in a way very detrimental to India. We will survive it. It's not like it's the end of the world. But, a lot of our sectors like shrimp, like textiles, gems and jewelry. A lot of them, the biggest customer is the US. And the moment you put 50% tariff, these businesses become obsolete overnight. Lakhs of jobs, millions of jobs, maybe. And the families of these people, they all get affected. So this is clearly a very aggressive act by the USA. And I think somewhere down the line, yes, there is one approach. We can be assertive and say, "Arey, dekh lenge, kuch nahi hota." But that's not the right way in foreign policy. You always have to work it out. It's who it is. It's the USA. You can't just say dekh lenge. It's never ended well for countries which have taken on the US as an adversary.
But
We
tell me,
have to
Chetan,
figure out.
I want you to sort of weigh in on the political dimension also of this, because Prime Minister Modi has built an image of a strong man, right? Over the last 10 years, he takes big decisions, demonetization, dealing with COVID, Pakistan, right? All the 4-day war that we had, Operation Sindoor, Balakot, etc., etc. Even with China, after Galwan, there was a very definitive strongman position that India took, and India stood by it. Why should it be different in the case of the US, you think?
Well, firstly, because it is the USA. You have to be realistic. This is the world's biggest, most powerful superpower, probably the only superpower country in the world. Number one. But that's not the only reason. The second reason is we were friends with the US for a very long time. It's not like we are sucking up to them suddenly. We were enemies. US and India have been great friends. I mean, the Prime Minister has been great friends with President Trump personally. And even before that, even in the previous governments, there is, I think, ever since the 90s or whatever, we've had a very, very friendly relationship with India. We manufacture all the iPhones that are sold in the US now. I mean, there has been too many things. So how can one announcement, one policy, which is so unfair to us, suddenly lead to such a aggressive stand from our side also? I don't think that is in our benefit. It may not even be in America's benefit. And sometimes, you have to be the greater person, and I think it's not in US interest also to make India an adversary, and maybe they've not thought through this. But for us to try to figure out a way out of this, which we can discuss how we can get out of this, I think will be a better approach than saying dekh lenge, okay.
So how do we get out of it? I mean, what are the options? Like I said, there are two examples in front of us. One is the Chinese example. They've stood up to Trump, and he's finally relented. But then the Chinese have, leverage. They have rare earths, they have semiconductors, they have manufacturing exports. So they use that. They use those instruments to get Trump to back down. And then there is the European approach, where basically saying, boss, matlab humse nahi ho payega. We are coming down. We are basically, kowtowing to you. Aapko jo bhi lagana hai, 10%, 15%, whatever it is, you put on us. These are the two approaches we've seen. And India needs to figure out a third way. What would that way be?
There are 3-4 different approaches. I mean, I think first of all is this bluster and chest thumping is not going to help. It may help domestic politics, but not really. I mean, domestic politics, we don't really care whether we defied ourselves to. Most people don't even understand the impact of tariffs so directly, because it's not like India-Pakistan situation here. It's a trade situation. It's very commerce, GDP related situation. So I think that doesn't help. I mean, and to be fair, the government has been responding. If you see the government notifications, Zaka, it's always, we feel the tariffs are unfair, we feel we've been targeted. Then the media comes in, and the media puts a beautiful Indian tadka to everything, and it says, MEA hits back. Stern response by India. India puts America in its place. India shakes this. America is shivering. Not helpful. In this environment, we are trying to, I'm not blaming any particular media, even social media, people who say such things, they get instant likes, views, but it can be very, very damaging for our country's relationship with a very good economic superpower, which can only help us. And I think first step is that we have to put a rein on that. The government can put a rein on a lot of things. They got to put a rein. This is a trade issue. We will resolve it. Second, you talk of leverage. We don't have that much leverage as China, but we do have some leverage. We have a lot of tariffs on American goods. We can offer to reduce those. We have 100% tariffs on some cars. We have 50% tariffs on liquor. Agricultural products, I know, are a sensitive one. Maybe leave that aside. We cannot touch the agricultural tariffs. But we have to realize, Zaka, that on one hand, we say India is its own. We are not a country who has a begging bowl. We are New India. We're flexing our muscle. And on the other hand, you say, why are you putting these tariffs? They're putting the tariffs because we've put the tariffs. So you can't say we are allowed to put tariffs because we are poor. You can't have begging bowl in one hand and flex your bicep with the other. It just doesn't make sense. If you've decided we are our own country, we are no longer that India, let's reduce some tariffs for America and say we will reduce this. So it is a stepwise process. You say we are going to do a comprehensive trade deal. We are ready to cut some tariffs, not like in a knee jerk. First of all, you give us a 90-day hold or a 180-day hold on these 50% tariffs. Then you start working on a comprehensive trade agreement, offer leverage, offer things like reducing tariffs for them. Then you start the diplomacy. We have to understand, Zaka, there is something personal here. There was a Nobel Peace Prize floating around somewhere. I'm not going to say anything more. But there is all forms of leverage. There's all forms of leverage in diplomacy. It's Chanakya Niti, the land of Chanakya Niti. We should figure all the ways we can get to them, and which doesn't cost India anything. How does it matter where the peace prize goes?
No, but Chetan, the problem with the peace prize was that India had to basically then say that, look, in this war that we had with Pakistan, Trump was the one who helped mediate the ceasefire, and no government can say that, right? Least of all,
government can say that.
A government that's 56
it's
inch.
Probably.
That's
yeah, but maybe there is a way to handle it. Maybe they say that they sent in their suggestions. Yeah, okay, people can send suggestions. That can be acknowledged. Zaka can send me suggestions on what I should do with my life. I can send you suggestions. This is very different from saying I agree with that, and maybe this was not the moment to get them the peace prize. Maybe we'll find another one when we do some other deal, or when we finally disarm Pakistan and we end terrorism together. Maybe India, and then the real peace prize should come then. But there is limited leverage, but it's not like we are in a land of no leverage. We have some leverage. We have to change our foreign policy. A good foreign policy is assertive one day, accommodative the other day.
But my last question, Chetan, is what about the public sentiment? What is the mood on the street when it comes to America? We know what the mood on the street is when it comes to Pakistan, when it comes to China. But vis-a-vis America, what is it? Love? Is it hate? Is it love-hate? What is it?
I think like I said, it's a trade issue. Tariffs are a trade issue. It's not directly a political or an identity issue. It's not a violent issue. In that way, it's not direct planes flying or terrorism happening. So I think it affects less people. A lot of people don't even know what has happened. Those who do know what has happened, one is what has happened, and second is the way it has happened. It has been very sudden, You can always say these tariffs are coming in 3 years and everybody prepares for them. But if you say this is from tomorrow and it comes with some insulting tweets about our economy and things like that, which is not nice, which is not the way diplomacy at least works. Maybe that's the way somebody wants to run their regime. But I mean, that I think is not nice. Having said that, we are not using Pakistani products.
Yeah.
But this phone I'm using is probably made in India and made by an American company. It's an iPhone. We are using all the social media like, X and Facebook and WhatsApp and everything. There is too much integration with this country. I mean, we cannot just, okay, whatever your emotional reaction is, we cannot do this. Look back at countries which have openly made America their enemy. It's never ended well for them. And we don't need to. They are our friend. It's a trade issue. It's a negotiation. We all know President Trump prides himself on being a deal maker. His book was called The Art of the Deal.
Yeah.
He's doing deal making. It's not like he says it and patthar ki lakir happens. We have to understand the strategy. We have to figure out the points. And yeah, he likes to feel that he's won. Okay. As long as we make him feel he win, as long as we also win, and that's the job. That's why it's such a tricky role to do foreign policy, foreign trade. And I think there is a win-win here. It is not at all like the Pakistan situation.
Going to, since you talked about books, I'm going to reference back to one of your most successful books about two states. I mean, it was in the North India, South India context, but right now, India, America feels like two states and two polar opposites.
It's a bit like that, but they did get married, in the end. So here also, I am not going to give up hope on American friendship. There is a lot of natural reason. This is the world's biggest democracy, the world's oldest democracy. Yeah. We need these two democracies to be friends. The humanity needs these two democracies to be friends. It's not a good idea. And I don't think it will ever change. It's just a great issue. We will resolve it. And just let's not get aggressive and say insulting things, hit back and, embarrassed. And these strong languages should be avoided by everybody.
Okay. Chetan Bhagat, it's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Safe travels. We'll see you again
Thank you.
soon. Okay, so that was Chetan Bhagat's take on, there's a time to be assertive, there's a time to be accommodative, and maybe we need a little bit of a mix of both to try and address this elephant in the room that is the trade issue with Trump and the tariffs. And let's see how this plays out over the next few days and weeks. All right, I want to shift focus away from all those international stories, the diplomatic fallout and so on and so forth, to some domestic stories. And the biggest political story happens to be in Bihar. Elections are due there, and the Bihar Special Intensive Review of Voter Rolls has dominated the headlines. It has sort of brought together the opposition India bloc. This entire monsoon session of Parliament, it's been completely washed out as a result of this SIR issue. But beyond the political noise, there is a reality on the ground which is hard to ignore. Clean voter rolls are the very fundamental, the foundation of free and fair elections, which in turn is the bedrock of democracy. But is this very bedrock now on shaky ground? The threat of infiltration along the 600-kilometer international border between Bihar and Nepal is a very real and present danger. The free movement across these borders is creating a nightmare for security agencies. Infiltrators are obtaining forged Indian documents, whether it's Aadhaar, voter ID cards, ration cards, and all of this is subsequently paving the way for their participation in elections. These are not Indian citizens. These are Nepali citizens or citizens of other countries who are using loopholes in the law and loopholes in the system. The ease with which you get these documents, these IDs, they are using that to participate in Indian elections. And of course, political parties are using them as well. CNN News 18's Anvit Srivastav is, in fact, out there in the border between Bihar and Nepal. He spent a few weeks there, and he did this investigation on the ground to find out how this nexus operates and what is it that can be done to try and fix this problem.
इलेक्शन कमिश्नर बैठे हैं, इन तीनों से मैं कह रहा हूं, एक दिन ऐसा आएगा बिहार में और दिल्ली में इंडिया गठबंधन की सरकार होगी, फिर हम आप तीनों को देखेंगे।
हलफनामा देना होगा या देश से माफी मांगनी होगी।
India and Nepal have long shared civilizational ties commonly known as Roti-Beti ka Sambandh, ties which have resulted in free movement of people across an almost open border. But it is this porous border which has created one of the biggest threats to the sanctity of India's poll processes.
My video journalist Ravi Ranjan and I are hardly 2 meters apart right now. While he is standing in Nepal, I am right now in the Indian territory. This is the nature of porosity when we talk about the international border between India and Nepal. And here you can see is an open field. The man with that red helmet on a black bike, the man on the blue two-wheeler, they're all moving from Nepal to India. Now imagine how easy would it be for any unidentified person to walk into India via Nepal.
सिक्योरिटी इशू तो जो है ना, मान लीजिए 2002 से पहले जब एसएसबी नहीं थी तो थोड़ा सा समस्या थी, लेकिन 2002 के बाद बॉर्डर पर एसएसबी आने के बाद हम लोग सुरक्षित ज़रूर हो गए हैं। लेकिन सुरक्षित में भी वहाँ से जो कुछ लोग नेपाल से, बांग्लादेश से, भूटान से, वो सब जो आके रह रहे हैं, अंदर सुरक्षित नहीं है। बाहरी बॉर्डर से हम लोग सुरक्षित हैं।
आप बिहार में इलेक्शन आने वाला है, आप लोग इलेक्शन में हिस्सा लेंगे। ऐसा अगर कोई बाहरी आदमी कागज़ बनवा के इलेक्शन में पार्टिसिपेट करता है तो उस पर क्या आप लोगों की प्रक्रिया है?
हम तो अपनी जानकारी में है कि हम देख रहे हैं कि बॉर्डर से सटे हुए लगभग 100-200 लोग को हम लोग जानते हैं कि उसको इंडिया का आधार बना हुआ है। तो जब कोई आधार बना लिया तो स्वाभाविक बात है, आधार से उस समय वोटर लिस्ट बनता था। अब आधार दिखाइए, वोटर लिस्ट में नाम चढ़ाइए, तो उससे बहुत सारे लोग का नाम चढ़ा है।
सबसे बड़ी बात है कि जो यहाँ धड़ल्ले से उनका ID बन रहा है, आधार कार्ड बन जाता है पैसा दे करके, वोटर ID कार्ड बन जाता है। वो पहले आते हैं कुटुंबती जुड़ने के लिए, उसके बाद धीरे धीरे अपना मजदूरी करते हैं, धीरे धीरे यहाँ आकर के बस जाते हैं, तो उसका प्रभाव यहाँ के जनमानस पर पड़ रहा है।
जैसे सर हमारे बोले अभी है ना, जो यहाँ के निवासी हैं उस सेम बेसिस पे वो लोग आते हैं, यहाँ पे मजदूरी करने के लिए आते हैं, रिलेशन में आते हैं, वो लोग आके यहाँ पे बस जाते हैं और धीरे धीरे हमारा रोजगार से लेकर देश का सुरक्षा तक सब में चूक जो आज हो रही है, बस यही चीज़ है कि आगे का जो अधिकारी है जब तक आगे का अधिकारी नहीं मिला हुआ था उनसे उनका आधार कार्ड कैसे बन रहा है?
हमारे निगरानी में कई आधार सेंटर ऐसा है कि जो है ना, हम लोग जानते हैं कि 5-5 हज़ार रुपया लेके आधार बना रहा है, लेकिन सिस्टम सोया हुआ था। आज चुनाव आयोग जागा है, लगता है कि कुछ अच्छा होगा।
With assembly polls approaching in Bihar, the police and forces guarding the border are on high alert, and repeated drives are being conducted to ensure that no such fake document comes to any use in these upcoming elections. The rush that you see I'm surrounded with is at Jogbani border check post in Bihar at the Indo-Nepal border. But the volume of people you see around me, is it humanly possible to check each one of them and to identify what they could be carrying? For exactly that mammoth task, we have the SSB, the Sashastra Seema Bal, deployed here. The size of people moving in and out, the regular seizures and the vulnerability of the open border clearly demands of technological upgradation and introduction of equipment that would make their task easier. As many people will pass from this border with commodities, they are all checked and their identities are checked. No one can pass through this border even despite the heavy volume of people moving without confirming their identity. We'll try and talk to one of the officers and find out what are the procedures and what are the challenges here at this area. सर, यहाँ पे आप लोग का चेकिंग वगैरह रहता है रेगुलर राउंड द क्लॉक, क्या चैलेंजेस रहते हैं और क्या आप लोगों का मैंडेट है यहाँ पे?
मैंडेट यही है कि नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के में कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ ना चली जाए जो नेशनल के लिए हैम्पर करे, और हमारी ये है कि आप चेक करके ही सारी चीज़ें जाएँ। Monitoring this mass of humanity moving from one side to the other presents multiple challenges and implications. Apart from the regular seizure of contraband, narcotics and weapons, this movement results in many infiltrators never returning and settling down here itself. The change is startling, particularly in the so-called no man's land along the border.
सर, इधर जनसंख्या में भी काफ़ी बदलाव आए हैं बॉर्डर पे, जैसे काफ़ी लोग आके रह रहे हैं बाहर से, तो जनसंख्या में भी काफ़ी बदलाव
ये तो है, जनसंख्या बढ़ा है। इसी वार्ड में जो था ना, मतलब वो देखते हैं करीब 5 साल के दरमियान में कम से कम 300-400 वोटर बढ़ गया है। हाँ, ये सब कोई देखने वाला नहीं है, और नेता सब जो क्या वोट लिया, बात खत्म हो गया।
पहले 5 साल पहले लगभग 1000 वोट कम था, अब 1000 वोट ज़्यादा बढ़ गया। फर्क क्यों नहीं पड़ेगा? फर्क पड़ रहा है अभी। और सब ये बाहरी सब वोटर सब है।
नेपाल का आदमी को इंडिया का नागरिकता बना लिया है, इंडिया का आदमी नेपाल का नागरिकता बना लिया, तो उसमें तो वोट ज़्यादा बढ़वे करेगा।
CNN News 18 made its way to Dumaria village, one of the locations flagged for heavy encroachment in no man's land. Sources reveal that residents in these settlements not only shelter infiltrators in exchange for money, but in some cases even marry off their daughters to foreign nationals, effectively granting them lifelong legitimacy and protection. The sights seen on the ground are clearly reflected in the surge witnessed in voter rolls. Data from the Election Commission and other portals actively maintaining voter data show a clear surge in the number of voters in Bihar's border districts, while districts like Araria witnessed a 41% spike from 2019. East Champaran alarmingly showed a 126% spike in voters since 2019. In comparison, districts like Nalanda and Munger in the interiors of the state witnessed a significant drop in voters compared to 2019. The data tells a story, a spike which is almost Himalayan in its rise. No wonder that the poll panel during its intensive revision exercise made some extensive cuts to the voter rolls in these regions. While Araria saw a reduction of over 1.5 lakh voters in the revised 2025 rolls, East Champaran saw the voter count plummet by over 3 lakh voters.
मज़ेदार बात है कि सीमांचल में जो न्यूनतम मजदूरी तय है उनसे आधी कीमत पर ये लोग लेबर के रूप में काम करते हैं, और धीरे धीरे ये लोग उस बस्ती में रच बस जाते हैं और फिर वहीं की लड़की से शादी कर लेते हैं, और शादी करने के बाद जो है उनका रिक्वायरमेंट जो है उनके फादर इन लॉ हो या मदर इन लॉ हो, और फिर उनका जो ग्रामीण जनप्रतिनिधि है वो लोग उनका रिकमेंड करते हो, और उस रिकमेंडेशन के आधार पे जो है उनका आधार कार्ड हो या वोटर आई कार्ड हो वह बन जाता है।
हम लोग 2003 का वोटर है, वोट बैलेट है, लेकिन लड़का सब उसके लिए इतना परेशानी है कि मतलब कभी कहता है कि जो मतलब ये वंशावली बनाइए, कभी कहता है कि जो मतलब आप जाति लगाइए, कभी निवासी लगाइए, कभी पासपोर्ट लगाइए।
6 महीना काम करते हैं, 6 महीना कागजे पत्र लेकर के घूमते रहते हैं। आज ये नियम, कल वो नियम, एक से एक नियम लगा ही रहता है। मेरा 2003 का वोटर आईडी है तो हमारा एक्सेप्ट है, अब मेरा बच्चा का अगर नहीं है तो उसको 1947 में जाना पड़ेगा। ये कौन सा नियम है?
Driven by vote bank politics or systematic failure, heavy encroachments along the international border between India and Nepal in the state of Bihar pose a serious and undeniable national security threat. With elections around the corner in Bihar, these settlements also have a potential to influence electoral results, and what happens in this region today will quietly reshape its future tomorrow. With video journalist Ravi Ranjan, this is Anvish Srivastava from Bihar for CNN News 18.
And that investigation is echoing across Bihar. In fact, the Prime Minister was in Bihar today. He was in Gaya just earlier today. He warned that illegal infiltrators, their time is up now. Whether it's in Bihar or in Bengal or any other state of this country, it is time for a national mission against illegal infiltration. Prime Minister Modi flagged concerns over the potential demographic change, warning that infiltrators are not only disrupting national security, but they also pose a risk of snatching away the rights and jobs of lawful Indian citizens, even putting his political rivals on notice for not backing a cause that is almost an imperative for national security.
देश में घुसपैठियों की बढ़ती संख्या चिंता का विषय है। बिहार के सीमावर्ती जिलों में तेजी से डेमोग्राफी बदल रही है। घुसपैठियों को बिहार के युवाओं के रोजगार नहीं छीनने देंगे। जिन सुविधाओं पर भारतीय लोगों का अधिकार है, उस पर घुसपैठियों को डाका नहीं डालने देंगे। इस खतरे से निपटने के लिए मैंने डेमोग्राफी मिशन शुरू करने की बात कही है। बहुत जल्द ये मिशन अपना काम शुरू करेगा। देश के भीतर बैठे घुसपैठियों के समर्थकों से भी सावधान रहिए। कौन घुसपैठियों के साथ खड़ा है? कांग्रेस और आरजेडी जैसे दल बिहार के लोगों का हक छीनकर घुसपैठियों को देना चाहते हैं, तुष्टीकरण के लिए।
The Supreme Court today modified its August 11th order on stray dogs in Delhi and the National Capital Region, which they said would be picked up from the streets and confined to dedicated shelters. Today, a 3-judge bench directed that such canines would be released in the areas where they were collected from after sterilization, deworming and vaccination. The law already provided for containment of rabies-infected or dangerous dogs. The Supreme Court has also applied this order nationally, which means that all High Court matters on stray dogs will now be shifted to the Supreme Court. The court directed municipal authorities to begin an exercise for creating a dedicated feeding spaces for stray dogs in each municipal ward. This balancing act by the top court is being welcomed by animal lovers.
How do you see the verdict coming in from the Supreme Court itself?
Extremely, extremely grateful, relieved, and we bow down to the wisdom of the court to have actually upheld not only the rule of law, the animal birth control rules, but also been sensitive to the cultural, sentimental, behavior of us Indians who were very anxious because of the previous directions that all dogs to be put in pounds, whatever, that's been put in abeyance. Dogs now have to be picked up, neutered, vaccinated, dewormed, and then put back in the same places where they were picked up from, unless they are biting dogs or if they are showing symptoms of rabies, in which case the protocol is already there in the rules also, but court has said they would not be released, which is absolutely fair to the point that today the court also upheld that feeding spots will have to be made by municipal corporations and local authorities so that people don't go around feeding here and there and inconveniencing others. I think it's a very balanced approach that the court has made.
Your first thoughts on the modification of the Supreme Court's earlier order?
I have to say that I'm relieved. I didn't expect anything else, to tell you the truth, because when the program was made 25 years ago, it was based on very detailed science, and science in collaboration with the WHO. A whole survey was done in each city. Everything was put in place. What went wrong with the program was that from the time it was formulated and made public policy to now, the government has not put in 1 rupee. Now, when they were removing polio, they put in 700 crores a month for 11 years. But for 25 years, you have not put in 1 rupee, either to make the ABC centers, either to make the ambulances to catch them, either to do anything, to train the NGOs. Now there would be, say, 500 NGOs or 2,000 NGOs in this country that are capable of doing ABC. Not one of them has been trained. Not one of them has been taught the laws. So the entire program fell into the hands of mafia people. So one NGO, which was unrecognized, unlicensed and untrained, but was related to a minister or related to the municipal commissioner, would take 15 contracts. So this program, if it is to work, A, has to have money in it. 2, has to have standardized MCD, standardized ABC centers.
That's a wrap of this edition of Brass Tacks, coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions.
In another. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
जी मैं समझ रही हूँ, हमारे साथ बने रहिए अविनाश and Anvit. Going to request you to continue staying with me. Let's also take our viewers through why this is such a massive threat when you talk about infiltration, as Anvit highlighted, particularly in India's east, especially when you look at Bihar, which is going to be going through assembly elections. This is now becoming a burgeoning threat. The concerns, of course, are illegal migration. Why is it happening? Because of forged documentation. The local governments, even the panchayat levels, are in fact involved in forging of these documents. Bogus voters are also then leading to a massive demographic change. And how is that now going to impact our country? It is going to impact the policy making of our nation. Anvit brings you another ground report. In fact, the threat of infiltration, this along the 600-kilometer international border in Bihar, is real and a growing one. The free movement across borders is creating a nightmare for security agencies, with infiltrators obtaining forged Indian documents with ease. That's subsequently paving way for their participation in elections, which can then have detrimental effect on not just the polity, but also the policy of the nation. While there has been many claims and counterclaims around the Bihar draft roll, which saw omission of 65 lakh names by the Election Commission, a reality check from the ground now reveals that this Herculean effort is a need of the hour.
The rush that you see I'm surrounded with is at Jogbani border check post in Bihar at the Indo-Nepal border. But the volume of people you see around me, is it humanly possible to check each one of them and to identify what they could be carrying? For exactly that mammoth task, we have the SSB, the Sashastra Seema Bal, deployed here. The size of people moving in and out, the regular seizures and the vulnerability of the open border clearly demands of technological upgradation and introduction of equipment that would make their task easier. As many people will pass from this border with commodities, they are all checked and their identities are checked. No one can pass through this border even despite the heavy volume of people moving without confirming their identity. We'll try and talk to one of the officers and find out what are the procedures and what are the challenges here at this area. सर, यहाँ पे आप लोग का चेकिंग वगैरह रहता है रेगुलर राउंड द क्लॉक, क्या चैलेंजेस रहते हैं और क्या आप लोगों का मैंडेट है यहाँ पे?
मैंडेट यही है कि नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के में कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ ना चली जाए जो नेशनल के लिए हैम्पर करे, और हमारी ये है कि आप चेक करके ही सारी चीज़ें जाएँ.
Monitoring this mass of humanity moving from one side to the other presents multiple challenges and implications. Apart from the regular seizure of contraband, narcotics and weapons, this movement results in many infiltrators never returning and settling down here itself. The change is startling, particularly in the so-called no man's land along the border.
सर, इधर जनसंख्या में भी काफ़ी बदलाव आए हैं बॉर्डर पे, जैसे काफ़ी लोग आके रह रहे हैं बाहर से, तो जनसंख्या में भी काफ़ी बदलाव
ये तो है, जनसंख्या बढ़ा है. इसी वार्ड में जो था ना, मतलब वो देखते हैं करीब 5 साल के दरमियान में कम से कम 300-400 वोटर बढ़ गया है. हाँ, ये सब कोई देखने वाला नहीं है, और नेता सब जो क्या वोट लिया, बात खत्म हो गया.
पहले 5 साल पहले लगभग 1000 वोट कम था, अब 1000 वोट ज़्यादा बढ़ गया. फर्क क्यों नहीं पड़ेगा? फर्क पड़ रहा है अभी. और सब ये बाहरी सब वोटर सब है.
नेपाल का आदमी को इंडिया का नागरिकता बना लिया है, इंडिया का आदमी नेपाल का नागरिकता बना लिया, तो उसमें तो वोट ज़्यादा बढ़वे करेगा.
CNN News 18 made its way to Dumaria village, one of the locations flagged for heavy encroachment in no man's land. Sources reveal that residents in these settlements not only shelter infiltrators in exchange for money, but in some cases even marry off their daughters to foreign nationals, effectively granting them lifelong legitimacy and protection. The sights seen on the ground are clearly reflected in the surge witnessed in voter rolls. Data from the Election Commission and other portals actively maintaining voter data show a clear surge in the number of voters in Bihar's border districts, while districts like Araria witnessed a 41% spike from 2019. East Champaran alarmingly showed a 126% spike in voters since 2019. In comparison, districts like Nalanda and Munger in the interiors of the state witnessed a significant drop in voters compared to 2019. The data tells a story, a spike which is almost Himalayan in its rise. No wonder that the poll panel during its intensive revision exercise made some extensive cuts to the voter rolls in these regions. While Araria saw a reduction of over 1.5 lakh voters in the revised 2025 rolls, East Champaran saw the voter count plummet by over 3 lakh voters.
मज़ेदार बात है कि सीमांचल में जो न्यूनतम मजदूरी तय है उनसे आधी कीमत पर ये लोग लेबर के रूप में काम करते हैं, और धीरे धीरे ये लोग उस बस्ती में रच बस जाते हैं और फिर वहीं की लड़की से शादी कर लेते हैं, और शादी करने के बाद जो है उनका रिकमेंड जो है उनके फादर इन लॉ हो या मदर इन लॉ हो, और फिर उनका जो ग्रामीण जनप्रतिनिधि है वो लोग उनका रिकमेंड करते हो, और उस रिकमेंडेशन के आधार पे जो है उनका आधार कार्ड हो या वोटर आई कार्ड हो वह बन जाता है.
हम लोग 2003 का वोटर है, वोट बैलेट है, लेकिन लड़का सब उसके लिए इतना परेशानी है कि मतलब कभी कहता है कि जो मतलब ये वंशावली बनाइए, कभी कहता है कि जो मतलब आप जाति लगाइए, कभी निवासी लगाइए, कभी पासपोर्ट लगाइए.
6 महीना काम करते हैं, 6 महीना कागजे पत्र लेकर के घूमते रहते हैं. आज ये नियम, कल वो नियम, एक से नियम लगा ही रहता है. मेरा 2003 का वोटर आईडी है तो हमारा एक्सेप्ट है. अब मेरा बच्चा का अगर नहीं है तो उसको 1947 में जाना पड़ेगा. ये कौन सा नियम है?
Driven by vote bank politics or systematic failure, heavy encroachments along the international border between India and Nepal in the state of Bihar pose a serious and undeniable national security threat. With elections around the corner in Bihar, these settlements also have a potential to influence electoral results, and what happens in this region today will quietly reshape its future tomorrow. With video journalist Ravi Ranjan, this is Anvish Srivastava from Bihar for CNN News 18.
All right, Siddhant, in fact, Anvit is back with us. Anvit, as we draw this entire discussion to a close, I want you to take us through the key takeaways of your entire investigation.
18 Primetime Studio, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions.
Viewers, we are live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions. Trust, viewers, trust the Supreme Court of India to take a stand that will make a veritable dog's breakfast of what is an already unmanageable issue. While I can't say whether the Supreme Court was intent upon virtue signaling, but I can say that the Supreme Court justices, the Supreme Justices, so to speak, have taken one step forward and two or maybe even three steps back in the process. Here are the bare facts, viewers. In the face of a stiff backlash from a section of the privileged classes, the upper classes, the upper middle classes, the middle classes, and several animal activists that belong to these classes, the Supreme Court modified its earlier order of August 11, which had directed rounding up of all